You're a relic of the analog age, Henry. We need innovators, not curators. That sentence was the end of my 30-year career at Norwin Freight Systems. After building the backbone of their logistics network, I was cast aside for a cloud platform they barely understood. But when the entire system collapsed within days, there was only one number they could call. And I wasn't answering, unless the terms were mine. I'm Henry Wallace, 62 years old, and until last Monday, I was the chief systems architect at Norwin Freight Systems in Kansas City, or as Ava Cormack had just labeled me, with a dismissive wave of her manicured hand. A relic. The meeting had been scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp in the glass-walled conference room we employees had nicknamed the Fishbowl. I'd arrived 15 minutes early, as was my habit for 3 decades. Punctuality was something I valued. Systems, after all, relied on timing, on processes happening exactly when they should. It was a principle I'd lived by, both in my code and in my life. Ava was already there when I arrived, tapping away on her tablet. She didn't look up until I cleared my throat. "Henry, take a seat." No good morning, no pleasantries, just cold efficiency. I'd known Ava Cormack for exactly 4 months and 12 days. She'd arrived from Everbridge Logistics, our parent company, with the title of VP of Digital Transformation. From day one, she'd made it clear that she considered everything at Norwin, from our coffee machines to our server infrastructure, hopelessly outdated. "I'll get right to the point," she said, finally setting her tablet down. Norwin is undergoing a significant technological overhaul. We're moving to a cloud-first strategy with QuantCloud as our primary platform provider. This will involve dismantling much of the legacy infrastructure. I nodded. This wasn't news. I'd been hearing about the cloud migration for weeks, though conspicuously, no one had sought my input on it. As part of this restructuring, she continued, we're reimagining our technical leadership team. We need people who can navigate the digital landscape of tomorrow, not just maintain systems of yesterday. The knot in my stomach tightened. I'd seen this coming from a mile away, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the gut. You've been with Norwin for a long time, Henry. 30 years, is that right? 30 years and 4 months, I corrected. Not that she cared. She forced a tight smile. That's remarkable loyalty. But technology has evolved exponentially in that time. The skills that built our past aren't necessarily the ones that will build our future. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded on the table. I've continuously updated my skills throughout my career. Ms. Cormack, I was writing distributed systems before most of your new hires were born. I implemented our first cloud integration 5 years ago. She waved this away as if swatting a fly. Yes. Nobody's questioning your historical contributions. But Everbridge expects agility, innovation, a forward-thinking mindset. And you don't believe I possess those qualities? Her smile tightened further. Henry, let's be candid. You've resisted every suggestion from QuantCloud's consultants. You've submitted lengthy critiques of their architecture. You've insisted on maintaining parallel systems rather than fully embracing the migration. Because their architecture has critical flaws, their data sovereignty model alone. You're a relic of the analog age, Henry. We need innovators, not curators. She cut me off with the rehearsed line, delivered with practiced finality. Norwin appreciates your years of service, but we're moving in a different direction. Today will be your last day. The words hung in the air between us. 30 years reduced to a corporate platitude and a pink slip. I see, I said, my voice steady despite the anger and humiliation churning inside me. And who will be managing the integration with Northline's dispatch system? or the custom routing algorithms for the Midwest corridor, or the emergency protocols when, not if, their cloud service experiences an outage? For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross her face, but it vanished quickly. The QuantCloud team has assured us they can handle all existing integrations. They have migration specialists with experience in logistics systems. I almost laughed. Have any of them worked specifically with our proprietary framework? Or with Raven Tech's API? Their documentation is notoriously incomplete. This conversation isn't productive. Henry. She slid a folder across the table. HR has prepared your separation package. It includes 6-month severance, continuation of benefits, and an NDA regarding company technologies. We'll need you to document all critical systems over the next week for a smooth transition. I didn't touch the folder. 1 week to document 30 years of systems integration. Systems I built from scratch, that exist nowhere else? The QuantCloud team is confident they can reverse engineer anything that's not documented. This time I did laugh. A short, bitter sound. Good luck with that. She frowned. This attitude is precisely why we're making this change. Henry, technology requires flexibility, not possessiveness. You've treated these systems like your personal fiefdom. I stood up slowly, finally taking the folder. No. Ava, I've treated them like what they are, the backbone of a $500 million logistics operation that cannot afford to fail. But you'll learn that lesson soon enough. As I turned to leave, she called after me. We'll need comprehensive documentation, Henry, not just what's in the official repositories. I paused at the door. You'll get exactly what the company deserves, Ms. Cormack. No more, no less. I walked out of the fishbowl with my head high, past the curious stares of colleagues who'd watched the meeting through the glass. 30 years at Norwin Freight Systems ended in a 15-minute meeting. The anger didn't fully hit until I reached my office, soon to be my former office. I closed the door and stood there, looking at the space I'd occupied for decades. The framed certificate from when I'd completed my master's degree in computer science while working full-time. The photo of Sarah and me in Yellowstone, taken just months before her diagnosis. The collection of vintage mechanical keyboards I'd lovingly restored, each with its distinctive feel and sound. I sank into my chair, my mind racing back to 1994 when I'd first walked through Norwin's doors. Back then, Norwin was a scrappy regional freight company with 20 trucks and big ambitions. Old Jim Norwin had hired me personally after his son, my college roommate, had recommended me. We need someone who can bring us into the computer age, Jim had said, showing me their current system. A room full of filing cabinets and a dispatcher with a radio and a map on the wall with pushpins marking truck locations. I built their first digital tracking system on a single server, spending nights and weekends coding while learning the intricacies of freight logistics on the fly. As Norwin grew, so did our technical infrastructure. I designed custom routing algorithms that saved millions in fuel costs. I implemented real-time tracking before it was industry standard. I negotiated our first EDI connections with major clients, opening doors to contracts that transformed Norwin from a regional player to a national contender. When Jim's health began failing in 2008, his son took over, and I was promoted to Chief Systems Architect. Henry, Jim told me from his hospital bed, you've built the nervous system of this company. Without you, we'd still be pushing papers and guessing where our trucks are. Those words had meant everything to me, especially coming during the darkest period of my life. Sarah had been diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer just months earlier. The next 2 years were a blur of hospital visits, hope, despair, and finally, grief. Through it all, my work at Norwin had been my anchor, The logical, predictable world of code and systems provided stability when everything else was chaos. After Sarah died, I threw myself even deeper into my work. I modernized our entire infrastructure, migrated critical systems to new platforms, integrated mobile applications for our drivers. I did it all while maintaining 99.98% uptime, a figure I was immensely proud of. But things began to change when Everbridge Logistics acquired Norwin 3 years ago. Jim's son retired with a golden parachute, and the family name remained only as a brand under the corporate umbrella. New executives arrived with their PowerPoints and their buzzwords: digital transformation, cloud first, agile methodology. I wasn't opposed to change. I'd been implementing change continuously for decades. What I opposed was reckless change for its own sake. Change driven by consultants who spent more time on slide decks than understanding the actual systems they proposed to replace. Ava Cormack was the embodiment of this new philosophy. She'd arrived with a mandate from Everbridge to accelerate Norwin's digital transformation journey. Within weeks, she'd engaged QuantCloud, a consulting firm specializing in cloud migrations, without so much as a conversation with me about our current architecture. I first learned of the full replacement plan in a company-wide meeting where it was presented as a done deal. The entire custom-built system, my life's work, was to be dismantled and replaced with QuantCloud's standardized logistics platform. I raised concerns immediately. Their platform lacked critical features our largest customers relied on. Their data sovereignty model would violate contractual obligations with certain government clients. Their disaster recovery protocol was woefully inadequate for a business that couldn't tolerate more than minutes of downtime. My concerns were noted, then ignored. When I submitted a formal risk assessment document, 65 pages of detailed technical analysis, I received a 2-sentence email thanking me for my historical perspective and assuring me that modern cloud architecture mitigates these legacy concerns. It was clear then that my days were numbered. I wasn't surprised by today's meeting, just by how quickly they'd moved to push me out. I looked around my office again, at the artifacts of a career spanning 3 decades. Then I turned to my computer and began to plan. They wanted documentation of all critical systems within a week? Fine. They would get documentation. Exactly what was in the official repositories, and not one line more. The unofficial patches, the emergency workarounds, the special integrations I'd built for our biggest clients, the undocumented API calls that kept our systems talking to partners whose own documentation was incomplete or incorrect. None of that would be included. I wasn't being petty. Well, not entirely. The truth was that much of this information existed only in my head or in personal notes. Over 30 years, I'd built so many custom solutions and workarounds that documenting them all properly would take months, not days. If they valued my knowledge so little, they would get exactly what they'd paid for. For the next week, I methodically prepared official documentation, carefully omitting anything that wasn't already in the company wiki or code comments. I watched as the QuantCloud consultants strutted around the office, mapping out their grand migration without once asking me substantive questions about the systems they were replacing. On my final day, I turned in my badge, my laptop, and a neatly organized folder of documentation to HR. Ava wasn't present, too busy with her transformation agenda to bid farewell to a relic, I supposed. A few of the old-timers took me out for drinks that evening. Dave from dispatching, Maria from customer service, Rajiv from the development team I'd built over the years. They were uncomfortable, caught between loyalty to me and fear for their own positions. "It's not right, what they did to you," Dave said. After a few beers, loosened his tongue. "You built this place." I shrugged. "Companies change. Priorities change. But to replace everything at once? Rajiv shook his head. I tried to tell them we should phase it in gradually. Test each component. They won't listen. When does the big switch happen? I asked, trying to sound merely curious. Maria grimaced. Monday. They're shutting down our systems Friday night and migrating everything over the weekend. Seamless transition, they keep saying. I nodded, taking a long sip of my scotch. Well, I wish them luck. None of us believed they would need mere luck. They would need a miracle. The weekend passed quietly. I spent it cleaning out my home office, organizing decades of notes and personal projects. I deliberately didn't check my phone much. I knew what was coming. Monday morning, I woke up without an alarm for the first time in years. I made myself a proper breakfast, read the news, and took a long walk in the park near my house. It was strange, having nowhere to be. 30 years of routine suddenly ended. When I returned home around noon, my phone showed 7 missed calls. 2 from Rajiv, 3 from unknown numbers, 1 from Dave, and 1 from a number I recognized as belonging to the main switchboard at Norwin. I ignored them all and made lunch. By 3 o'clock, the missed calls had reached double digits. Text messages had begun to arrive as well. Henry, please call me. It's urgent. Rajiv. Systems down. Complete cluster. Call ASAP. Dave. Finally. Around 4. A call came in from a number I didn't recognize. On a hunch, I answered. Henry Wallace. My voice was calm, neutral. Henry, this is Thomas Everbridge. Thomas Everbridge, CEO of Everbridge Logistics. I'd met him exactly once, at a corporate function where he'd shaken my hand without really looking at me. Mr. Everbridge, what can I do for you? As if I didn't know. We have a situation at Norwin that requires your expertise. His voice was strained, trying to sound authoritative while clearly under duress. I'm no longer employed by Norwin or Everbridge, as of last Friday. Yes, I'm aware. That's why I'm calling personally. We'd like to bring you in as a consultant to address some transitional issues with our systems migration. I allowed myself a small smile. Transitional issues? He cleared his throat. There have been some unexpected complications with the QuantCloud implementation. We're experiencing service disruptions. What kind of disruptions? A pause. Total system failure. Nothing's routing. Customer orders from the weekend are stuck in limbo. We can't connect to Northline or Raven Tech. The QuantCloud team is baffled. Of course they were. They had no idea about the custom protocols I'd implemented for those integrations. The handshake sequences that weren't in any documentation because they'd been worked out directly with the engineers at our partner companies years ago. That sounds serious, I said mildly. It's catastrophic. Henry, the corporate veneer was cracking. We're hemorrhaging money by the minute. Every truck is sitting idle. Customers are threatening to jump ship. And what would you like me to do about it? Come in. Fix it. Name your price. The desperation was clear now. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. My consulting rate is $200 per hour, with a minimum engagement of 80 hours, payable in advance. Done. I'll have a contract sent over immediately. I haven't finished, I said. I require complete authority over all technical decisions during the recovery process. No interference from QuantCloud or your transformation team. He hesitated only briefly. Agreed. And one more thing. I work remotely. I won't be coming into the office. But we need you here, on site, to coordinate with the team. No, you need me to fix your systems. I can do that from home. Those are my terms. Mr. Everbridge, take them, or leave them. Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear him weighing his options. There were none. Fine. Work however you want. Just get us back online. I'll expect the contract and the first payment within the hour. Once they're received, I'll begin work." I hung up without waiting for his response. Then I went to make another cup of coffee. It was going to be a long night, but for the first time in years, I felt truly valued. The contract arrived by email 30 minutes later, along with confirmation of a wire transfer for $16,000, the first 80 hours at my stated rate. I reviewed the terms carefully, made a few adjustments to strengthen my authority, and sent it back. Within minutes, I received the countersigned agreement. Only then did I power up my personal laptop and begin to assess the damage. I had remote access credentials that hadn't been part of the official handover, not out of malice, but because they were personal development accounts I'd used for testing over the years. These would give me visibility into what was happening without needing to go through Norwin's corporate VPN. What I saw wasn't pretty. The migration had been a disaster from the start. The QuantCloud team had attempted to port our custom routing algorithms directly to their platform without understanding the underlying logic. They'd missed critical dependencies. They'd failed to properly map data structures between systems. Most catastrophically, they'd bungled the security certificates for our partner integrations, meaning none of our automated connections to companies like Northline Express or Raven Tech Logistics were functioning. I typed up a brief assessment and emailed it to Thomas Everbridge, CCing Rajiv, who I knew would understand the technical details. I deliberately did not copy Ava Cormack. Initial assessment complete. Multiple critical failures in the migration process. Estimated time to minimal functionality. 36 hours. Full restoration. 1 week plus. Proceeding with emergency recovery protocols. Then I got to work. The first priority was to restore connections to our partner companies. Without those, Norwin couldn't move freight, its entire reason for existence. I wrote small adapter programs that would bridge between our old integration methods and QuantCloud's new API structure. It wasn't elegant, but it would work as a stopgap. Around midnight, my phone rang again. It was Ava Cormack. I let it go to voicemail. A text followed immediately. "Henry, we need to talk about your approach. The QuantCloud team has concerns about your methodology." I ignored it and continued working. By 3 a.m., I had cobbled together enough of a solution to get basic communication flowing between Norwin systems and our major partners. Orders could now be sent and received, though the routing was still manual. I sent another update email, then crashed for a few hours of sleep. When I woke up, I had 17 new emails and 9 missed calls. I ignored them all and went back to work after a quick breakfast. The next critical issue was the routing system. QuantCloud's generic algorithm was nowhere near as efficient as the custom solution I'd built over decades of understanding Norwin's specific needs. Their system was trying to optimize purely on distance, ignoring crucial factors like typical traffic patterns, driver hours of service limitations, and client-specific delivery windows. I couldn't fully recreate my original system in the time available, but I could implement a simplified version that would at least get trucks moving efficiently again. I spent the entire day coding, pausing only for coffee and a sandwich. By evening, I had a working prototype. I deployed it to the test environment and ran simulations using yesterday's order data. The results were promising, about 80% as efficient as my original system, but light years ahead of what QuantCloud had implemented. As I was preparing to push the code to production, my phone rang again. This time, it was Rajiv. "Henry, thank God." He sounded exhausted. "Your fixes for the partner integrations are working. We've cleared most of the weekend backlog." "Good. I'm about to deploy the new routing system. How bad is it there?" He lowered his voice. "It's a war zone. Ava's been locked in meetings with Thomas Everbridge all day. The QuantCloud people are pointing fingers at our legacy architecture. They're saying you deliberately sabotaged the migration. I snorted. By doing exactly what I was asked to do, providing the documentation that existed in the official repositories? They're claiming you withheld critical information. I provided exactly what was in the company systems. If they wanted the knowledge in my head, they should have kept me around. Rajiv was quiet for a moment. There's talk about bringing you back, not as a consultant. Permanently. On whose terms? I don't know the details. But Thomas Everbridge has been asking questions about your role, your knowledge, how central you were to everything working. A bit late for that realization, isn't it? Better late than never. Rajiv sounded hopeful. We need you, Henry. Not just for this crisis, but going forward. I sighed. Let's get through this emergency first. I'll deploy the routing system now. Keep an eye on it and let me know if anything looks off. After hanging up, I pushed the code to production, then leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. The anger that had fueled me since my dismissal was beginning to fade, replaced by a more complex emotion. Part of me wanted Norwin to suffer for discarding me. But another part, the part that had poured 30 years of my life into building these systems, couldn't stand to see them fail. My phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Wallace, this is Thomas Everbridge. We need to meet tomorrow to discuss a more permanent arrangement. Name the time and place. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Let's see how the systems perform overnight. We can talk tomorrow afternoon. The next morning, reports came in that the routing system was working. Not perfectly, but well enough that trucks were moving again and customers were getting their shipments. The immediate crisis was subsiding. Around noon, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Thomas Everbridge himself was standing there, without entourage or security. Mr. Wallace, may I come in? I stepped aside, genuinely surprised. Coffee. Please. I led him to my kitchen, putting on a fresh pot while he looked around my modest home with barely concealed curiosity. Your fixes are working, he said as I handed him a mug. The QuantCloud team is integrating them into the platform. They won't fully understand the logic behind them, I warned. They're treating symptoms, not causes. He nodded, sipping his coffee. That's why I'm here. We need you back at Norwin. Henry, not as a consultant, as chief systems architect, with expanded authority. I leaned against the counter, studying him. Thomas Everbridge was in his early 50s, with the polished appearance of someone who'd spent his career in boardrooms rather than server rooms. Today, however, he looked rumpled, tired. And what about Ava Cormack and her transformation agenda? He grimaced slightly. Ms. Cormack's approach has proven overly aggressive. She's been placed on administrative leave pending a review. And QuantCloud? We're reassessing that relationship. I set my coffee down. Let me be clear about what happened. Mr. Everbridge, I didn't sabotage anything. I provided exactly what was in the official company repositories. If that wasn't enough, it's because 30 years of institutional knowledge can't be documented in a week. It lives in relationships, in experience, in countless decisions and adaptations made over decades. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I understand that now. Do you? Because this isn't just about systems or code. It's about respect. It's about recognizing the value of experience rather than dismissing it as obsolete. That's why I'm here in person, he said, to acknowledge that mistake and to make it right. I studied him, weighing his sincerity. What exactly are you offering? Reinstatement as Chief Systems Architect, a substantial raise, a seat on the executive leadership team, and complete technical authority over Norwin systems, including veto power on any migration or transformation initiatives. It was more than I'd expected, but something still didn't sit right. And the too old for technology perspective? Has that magically changed in a week? He winced. Those were not company views. Henry, they were the misguided opinions of individuals who no longer speak for Everbridge. I walked to the window, looking out at my quiet suburban street. For 30 years, Norwin had been my professional home. I'd built its systems from nothing. I knew every line of code, every integration point, every quirk and feature. Part of me wanted to accept, to return triumphant. But another part remembered the dismissive wave of Ava's hand. A relic of the analog age, the casual cruelty of being discarded after 3 decades of loyal service. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Everbridge, but I'm going to decline. He blinked, clearly not expecting this response. We can negotiate the terms, whatever you want. It's not about terms. It's about trust. That's been broken, and I don't see how it can be repaired. You built these systems, Henry. They're your legacy. I turned back to him. They were my legacy. Now they're someone else's problem. Be reasonable. You can't just walk away from 30 years. I didn't walk away. I was pushed. There's a difference. His facade of contrition began to crack. What do you want then? More money? A different title? I want what everyone wants, Mr. Everbridge. To be valued for my contributions, to be treated with respect. You can't buy that after the fact. He set his coffee down, frustration evident. Do you understand the position you're putting me in? The board is demanding answers. Our biggest clients are threatening to leave. The entire Norwin operation is at risk. I understand completely, but that's not my responsibility anymore. You have my fixes for the immediate issues. My consulting contract runs for another 70 hours or so. I'll continue to address critical problems during that time. After that, you're on your own. This is about revenge, isn't it? Making us pay for firing you? I shook my head. No, it's about self-respect, and about recognizing when it's time to move on. He stared at me, then nodded slowly. I underestimated you. Henry. We all did. Yes, you did. After he left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, turning over the conversation in my mind. Had I made the right decision? 30 years was a long time to walk away from. The systems at Norwin were like old friends, familiar and comfortable. But the more I thought about it, the more certain I became. It was time for something new. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was a number I didn't recognize. Henry Wallace. Mr. Wallace, this is Elena Reyes, CTO at Clearline Freight. I understand you might be available for new opportunities. Clearline was one of Norwin's main competitors. I sat up straighter. How did you hear that? Let's just say news travels fast in our industry, especially news about system failures and the people who can fix them. I see. We've been watching Norwin's transformation disaster with great interest, and we've been even more interested in the man who built the systems they're so eagerly dismantling. What exactly are you proposing, Ms. Reyes? A senior position at Clearline, Chief Technical Advisor, reporting directly to me. Triple your previous salary. Complete autonomy over your projects. And she paused for effect. The opportunity to build something new, not just maintain legacy systems. That sounds intriguing. We're not looking to replicate Norwin's mistakes, Henry. We value experience. We understand that innovation doesn't mean throwing away institutional knowledge. It means building upon it. For the first time since my dismissal, I felt a spark of genuine excitement. I'd like to hear more. How about dinner tonight? I can have a car pick you up at 7. After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair, a smile spreading across my face. Sometimes, being pushed out of one door opens the way to opportunities you'd never have found otherwise. Over the next few days, I continued to fulfill my consulting obligations to Norwin while exploring the Clearline opportunity. The systems at Norwin stabilized, though they were operating at reduced efficiency. Rajiv kept me updated on the internal fallout. Ava Cormack had been officially terminated. The Quant Cloud contract was under legal review. Thomas Everbridge was facing tough questions from the board. My dinner with Elena Reyes had turned into a fascinating discussion about the future of logistics technology. Unlike Ava's buzzword-laden vision, Elena had concrete ideas about integrating proven systems with emerging technologies. She valued my experience rather than seeing it as an obstacle. By the end of the week, I had signed a contract with Clearline, Chief Technical Advisor, with a compensation package that made my Norwin salary look paltry. But more importantly, with respect and autonomy. On my last day as a Norwin consultant, I received an email from Rajiv. Just heard the news about you joining Clearline. Can't say I'm surprised. Things are still chaotic here. The systems are functioning, but barely. Rumors are flying about Everbridge, looking to sell Norwin. Too much damage has been done. For what it's worth, many of us are updating our resumes. If you hear of any openings at Clearline, keep me in mind. It shouldn't have ended this way. You deserved better. Best of luck. Rajiv, I wrote back immediately, telling him I'd already mentioned his name to Elena. Clearline would be lucky to have him. The following Monday, I drove to Clearline's headquarters for my first day. The building was newer than Norwin's, the lobby more modern. But underneath the cosmetic differences, the business was fundamentally the same, getting freight from point A to point B as efficiently as possible. Elena met me in the lobby, extending her hand with a warm smile. Ready to revolutionize freight logistics. Henry? I shook her hand firmly. I've been doing that for 30 years. I'm ready to do it for 30 more. As she led me toward the elevator, she mentioned casually, "Did you hear about Norwin? Everbridge announced this morning they're selling it. Distressed assets, they're calling it." I nodded, feeling no satisfaction in the news. "Any word on who's buying?" "Several vulture firms are circling. The technology is considered the main liability. Too custom, too dependent on institutional knowledge that walked out the door." She glanced at me. "Their loss is our gain." In the elevator, she pressed the button for the top floor. "I've been thinking about something beyond your role here at Clearline, a side venture, if you're interested." "I'm listening." "There are going to be more companies like Norwin, old-school operations trying to modernize by throwing out decades of customized systems in favor of one-size-fits-all cloud solutions. And most of them will fail spectacularly." The elevator doors opened onto an executive floor with a stunning view of the city. "What if," she continued, leading me down the hall, "we created a specialized consultancy? One that helps companies modernize without self-destructing. Using your experience, my connections, and a team of experts who understand both the old and new worlds." We stopped outside a corner office with my name already on the door. "A rescue operation for failed cloud migrations?" I asked. Intrigued. She smiled. "Exactly. We could call it Legacy Forward, or Phoenix Systems. Something that captures the idea of rising from the ashes of technological hubris." I laughed. "I like it. The number of potential clients is only going to grow. So you're interested?" I looked around the office, my new professional home, a place where my experience was valued, not dismissed, where 3 decades of knowledge was seen as an asset, not a liability. "Absolutely," I said. "Let's build something new by respecting what came before." It seems there's a market for that approach after all. As I settled into my new desk, I reflected on the whirlwind of the past few weeks, from relic to sought-after expert, from discarded to valued, from ending to beginning. Sometimes, I thought, you have to be pushed aside before you can move forward. And sometimes, those who do the pushing learn the hardest lessons of all. I opened my laptop and began to write the first lines of code for a new system. Not a replacement for what I'd built at Norwin, but something that incorporated those lessons while looking toward the future. The best of both worlds. Just as Elena had said, not innovators versus curators, but innovation built upon curation, experience, and fresh thinking, working in harmony. In the end, that was never a battle of old versus new. It was always about respect, understanding, and the wisdom to know that progress doesn't mean abandoning everything that came before. As for Norwin and Ava Cormack and Thomas Everbridge, they had learned that lesson the hard way. 62 wasn't too old for technology after all. It was just the right age for wisdom.